Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the next edition of our talk show with our guests. Today we have Marc van der Gaag, who is from a company called Luminis in the Netherlands. And Marc is actually a sales executive there, whom I had a chance to meet recently during a discussion that we had. Marc, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me and our audience as well.
Sure. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah. Marc, tell me a little bit more about what Luminis does and what exactly do you do within Luminis?
So on an abstract level, we provide custom software development. On a more philosophical level, we provide a meaningful interaction between the user and their respective customers. So just building the software is not enough. You have to understand what makes it meaningful to the individual.
That is very interesting. So essentially, are you in a line of business where no two customers are alike, where you will have to go and listen specifically to the customer and customize your offering according to the customers?
Well, there is an irony in that because we do see basically identical customers as an account,
Yeah.
but they service very specific customers themselves, and that is what sets them apart.
Absolutely. Which is again an interesting point, right? You're still selling to the same kind of customers, but if they are catering to a different audience, that also changes the way what they expect from you. Whereas the
Exactly.
technology that you deploy might be the same, but how it gets used by the customer is going to be different there as well. Fantastic. So now, one of the things that that I talk a lot about is this idea of customer centricity, right? So, what does customer centricity mean within Luminis today?
Well, customer centricity within Luminis means that you become a student of your customer.
Yeah.
So what we mean by that is, what would we do if we were in your shoes? How would we engage with the audience that you get to deal with day to day?
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean the entire audience. What we have as a discussion with the customers, what is the 20% of your customers that amount to about 80% of your revenue, like a classical Pareto analysis?
Yeah.
Because those 20% of customers dictate the way that you build your processes, build your engagement. And obviously you want to retain those customers, and those customers' needs will have a much higher impact than the total population of customers in itself.
Fantastic. And this is something that I talk a lot about when I talk about customer centricity, saying that you cannot be everything to every customer, right? Because at the end of the day, especially in your line of business, where you don't sell a standard off-the-shelf solution, having a meaningful dialogue with the customer means that it's pretty time-consuming and resource-consuming from your part. And if that is the case, you have to choose your customers wisely who see the value in working with you. Am I right in understanding why you also look at saying that 20% of your customers account for 80% of your business, and you need to engage with them very well?
Exactly. And that also makes that our customer acquisition cost is relatively high.
Yeah, indeed. So the customer, which actually is very interesting, right? Because when your customer acquisition cost is is high, you have to better make sure that you make it count, correct? That is the fact.
Yes.
And that for me is what triggered me when I actually saw the kind of efforts that you and your company takes in trying to make sure that you identify the right kind of customers. And the term that you used in your case was the ICP, or the ideal customer profile. Tell me a little bit more about this. What is this ideal customer profile idea within Luminis, and why was it born?
Well, it was born to ease the pain of killing your darlings.
Yeah.
So, for example, in the Netherlands, we have a few usual suspects, and everyone that does custom software development or secondment has the same 4 or 5 customers. We all do a few out of the bigger banks. We all do a few out of the big government organizations, but that is not what we would define as a customer, let alone an ideal customer. But it is very nice to be able to say on a birthday saying I'm the account manager for the Dutch tax administration. That's massive bragging rights.
Yeah.
It doesn't help your company in itself, but you as a sales individual can say, I go to lunch with the CIO of the Dutch tax administration
Yeah.
monthly. And we all know that as a sales, if you lose fast as a single rule of thumb, and the other one is kill your darlings.
Yeah.
Having the ability to say, we have this bank as a customer, like for every startup, every vendor startup ever that comes from Silicon Valley, they all have the same 3 key reference. We have a generic big bank somewhere around the world. We have a generic insurer, and we have a manufacturing company. But that says absolutely nothing about the mutual impact of that customer relationship.
Fantastic.
And you want to find a commercial optimum, which makes it easier for you to sell into that organization, makes it easier for that organization to buy from you, and eventually the interconnecting pin, the salesperson, needs to be able to be successful easily.
Indeed. I love this. And before I dig into that, I like what you talked about, skill your darlings, because your darlings could be giving you a lot of revenues today, right? Not necessarily profitability, but revenue wise, they could be doing a lot of things, but that's just about it, right? They're not helping you open doors, or they're not helping you identify, leverage those kind of relationships into bigger business. Whereas you could sometimes have, it's not necessarily a darling in terms of revenues, but it could be a darling in terms of the potential it is to open doors with new clients. So essentially the criteria that you use, and I want to bring that back because you said the example you gave is that the Dutch tax administration, the CIO, might not be giving you a lot in terms of volume today, but it could open doors for you. So this idea of the reference value of a client might also be something that is important rather than pure numbers or volumes. Exactly. So that's my understanding. So that's really nice. Now, when you started doing this, and you also said something which I love in the fact that you are taking a proactive approach to this, saying that not only should we be giving value to the client, but the client should also be delivering value to us. And value to Luminis might come in various forms. Am I right in understanding that? It might not just be revenue, it could also be reference value. So tell me about what was the thought process when you started to do this ICP. I'm assuming ICP then was to say, which are those customers which we should make our darlings, and which of our darlings which do not fit into that, we need to slowly have a different way of talking to them.
So our initial step was understanding why customers bought from us. Why did they keep coming back? And that feels really counterintuitive, because you don't want to run the risk of giving insights to a customer saying, yeah, I can easily change you for someone else. But having that discussion in itself is really valuable, because then you can actually start to pinpoint and correlate the characteristics that make up an eventual ICP. So what we found out, and not only at Luminis, but in the rest of my career as well, that understanding those dynamics gives you a different insight into the way that people actually buy from you, because there is not always a full alignment between the actual reason that a customer signed a contract and what marketing is trying to sell to the market in itself.
Yeah, indeed.
Those can be fundamentally different.
Yeah. I love this. So Marc, so essentially you said you began by talking to some of your customers about why they were doing business with you, right?
Yes.
And essentially, what kind of answers did you get? Because I'm sure that not all the answers that you got were answers that you wanted to hear, right?
Yeah, because at a single customer, they loved us because we were better at recruiting specific profiles than they were. So we were a very interesting fit for them to lower the cost of hiring. And because they had a reference value for us, and that became strategic partnership. And since we can keep on investing in employer branding and being on different stages, that has a pull effect on talent.
Yeah, indeed.
Talent doesn't always say you are a big name, so I want to work for you. But if they can see your engineers in the field.
Indeed. Well, because that's correct, right? Because in your business, you're not just talking about the customer, because you're also talking about the potential employees that want to come and work with you, that you can then second to your other customers, right? Because you are looking at branding from two perspectives: branding to the end customer, but also branding to that potential part-time employee or employee who wants to come and sell their services to you, that you can then sell to the others as well, right? So that's great. So essentially, you were talking to some of the customers, you were trying to find out if there was a strategic fit. But at what point do you start saying, wait a minute, the traditional way that we have been looking at our customers is wrong? So tell me, understand that, when did you come to that realization that what we were doing is,
we always thought that customers came to us because we were the best in the market. But that isn't necessarily the case. That is what we say as a marketing outing. We are the best technical conscience on custom software development that is available in the Dutch market. But then you get the true customer story, that a single customer said, you are way better equipped to hire large volumes of people, or you actually hired some of my engineers, and we don't want to lose that knowledge. So we help an ex-employee excel in a new organization and help them build a new team around them to then bring back value to us. And someone even said, it is cheaper to hire a same quality engineer from you than to find them in the market, because we have a massive scarcity in the market. So it takes about 3-4 months minimum to hire a senior engineer.
I love it. That's very interesting, because essentially what you're talking about right now, I'm sure, did not just come from one customer. It's talking to 3 or 4 customers, and each of them saying something about why they wanted to work with you. And now suddenly the market is just not a uniform market, right? It's a bunch of clients who come to you for different reasons, and that should also start giving you an idea that maybe we should be looking for those kind of customers who are looking for something that is in our strong point, correct? So essentially the level of strategic fit between what you can offer and what the potential customer is looking for. Because for me, that's one of the things that we had a discussion where we said, one of the criteria is what is the level of strategic fit. And that fit could very well be that, hey, we have the strength in this market for recruiting the brightest people, but this is exactly what the customers want as well. And that you cannot do without talking to clients. And then essentially you start now forming that kind of idea, saying that, hey, if there's a fit between what we have to give and what the customers want, your chances of having a deep, meaningful relationship with the customer just went up, correct? So that could be one of the criteria, saying how much of a strategic fit is there between us and our potential customers. Am I right in understanding that?
Exactly. And that opens the door. And if you combine that with an eagerness to deeply understand your customer's reality, that makes it a mutual investment.
That's great, right? So Mark, but the fact is that when we say, when you want to understand your customers deeply, right? But the assumption there is, when you do that, the customer wants to give you access to people within their own organization for you to deepen that knowledge. So to what extent did you also factor that in? You understand what I mean?
Well, there's a nuance to that, because a deep understanding based on information doesn't always come from the customer.
Great. Okay.
So we see key customers that have reference cases on their website. And it is really important to understand why their main customer chose them. Because if you then correlate that to what is the value that they add to their customers and how can you extend that, is very, it opens a very interesting conversation. If I say, Deva, your biggest customer is company XYZ. I had a chat with them and they are moving in this direction. Are you able to change to according to their need, and what are your biggest inhibitors?
Indeed. No, I love it, because for me, that's again one of the things, especially I'm thinking, that is what you will need when you go in and to find a new customer, right? Because I'm assuming that when you already have an existing customer, then a customer who gives you deep access to people within their organization is the one where you can test your ideas. But then once you test it out, then you can go and say, hey, it worked with this client. We went to a client who's been working with us and we talked to different people and we realized that the reason why they also worked with us was because we helped them sometimes educate them about what is going to happen in their market. And you take it and say, oh, wait a minute, if this is what we can do for our existing clients, whenever I'm going to be talking to a client who is not working with us, a prospect who's not working with us right now, providing that same level of insight and providing that same level of value might give you a better chance to deal with those customers. So that's the way I'm taking a look at this in terms of saying, just when I'm taking a look at new customers, the similarity about how it resonates with some of the existing customers where you've done something similar is going to help you choose the right kind of customers, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, that's very, very interesting. Now, one of the things that we talk about when we talk about customer centricity, and that's a question that I want to ask you, Marc, is we talk about how as much as we want from our side to standardize our offering to a certain extent. Why? Because that keeps your cost under control. But at the same time, if you standardize it to a point that the customer says, wait a minute, you're just a commodity, right? Because standardization. So how do you draw that line between, you know what I mean? That you want to have customers who want a level of customization in your offer, right? Because that will then mean that you're not seen as a commodity, right? I can buy it from you, I can buy it from the competition. So where do you, but on the other hand, you don't want to customize too much because then your profitability goes down. So how do you do that balance in how you choose your customers?
In our specific situation, in my current employer, it is not that much of discussion because we can sell the standardized platform, the cloud services, the migrations, but that is the beginning of the journey. So then comes all the customization, but the customization is paid. So we don't have to pre-fund customization.
I like it. Okay. I love it. So Marc, then, which then means that if you have a choice between two customers where one customer has in-house expertise and another customer does not have in-house expertise, which one would you fit? Which one would fit under your ICP? You see what I mean? Because if they have their own in-house expertise, they will not buy your additional value-added services. Yeah. How do you draw the line between these two?
I personally like customers that can counter my own expertise. Because that means that they are inherently able to evaluate the service that I bring to the table. As opposed to, let's say, a customer who is new to building custom software and is used to commercial off-the-shelf stuff. They will say, why is this 3, 4, 5 times more expensive? And that introduces a whole new discussion. But on the other side, I can make a massive difference with a customer without expertise. And I can add less of a difference to a customer that can evaluate me on the level that I need to be evaluated.
I love it. So what you're saying then is that sometimes you may think it's a good thing that the customer might not have the expertise, but that would be a pain in the behind customer because a lot of times they will maybe negotiate too hard on you on things.
Exactly.
Or it's even worse that once they come in as a customer, they're going to become ultra demanding because the scope of the project changing is not something that they have an expertise and understanding. Is that correct?
Correct. So not only does the customer have that expertise, that is one of the criteria. So a customer with a high level of expertise, but in a declining market, that combination is really interesting. As opposed to a customer without expertise in a growing market. So no expertise, declining market is a big no-go.
Indeed. Well, I love this, right? Now, Marc, in all the scheme of things, right? So all of this is nice for us to say this is what we want, but we should not rule out the fact that at the end of the day, you're still a business, right? So the fact is that we still need those revenues or those constant revenue streams as well. So my question to you then is, based on what you're saying, is choosing an ICP is not a simple matter. It's something that an organization has to give a lot of thought to, take a look at its own strategy, understand the customer strategy, look at its offerings, understand what the customer is looking for, understanding the customer's markets. It's also saying what level of expertise do we bring, what level of expertise does the customer bring in, and all of this. But on top of that, the practicality or the reality on the ground is business needs to be going on. So while we would like to pick and choose which customers to work with, not all the time do we have the leeway for that. So how do you try and account for this as well? The practicality of saying we need constant revenue streams also coming in, and you may not always be able to work with the preferred customers you would like to do with.
Yeah. So being able to work with only high scoring ICPs is a luxury that not a lot of organizations have.
Yeah.
So at some point,
Yeah.
you have to start looking at what are the criteria that's low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
And a lot of the stuff that you can automate, like
Yeah.
the market cap of a specific segment,
Yeah.
or the overall reports of a branch organization.
Yeah.
That says a lot about
Yeah.
the entirety of a group.
Okay, so essentially that's essentially what you're saying. That's what you're looking at as well. Because one of the things that when I talk about it, I say you need to have a set of criteria, right? So maybe that's what we'll get into, right? So when you try and take a look at it, right? So because different clients have different strengths and weaknesses, right? And you need to have a mix, because no two customers are alike. So you could have a bunch of ideal customer profiles, but no two ideal customer profiles are going to be the same. There's still going to be enough difference. But help me understand, when you take a look at typically what kind of criteria do you look for? You know what I mean? Criteria that you define as saying, this is what we look for in an ideal customer profile.
So we built a what we call a Luminis way of working.
Yeah. Okay.
That is our ideal scenario in which we can excel in what we do.
Yeah.
But that is basically, for us, it was meant as an internal document. We started turning it around. So this is the way that we know that we can excel in what we do. What's the deviation of the customer's way of working and us? Yeah. And you can peel that off to criteria. So what's the amount of UX UI people as opposed to front-end developers and back-end developers? So UX would be user experience, right? User experience, yes, UI exactly. Would be user interface, right? So you're now looking at the competencies that the client wants, because competencies... No, not just the competencies. They can have the best UX person ever, but if they are just alone against an army of developers, it doesn't work. I love it. So what I'm saying is that, so this idea of the UX UI, because at the end of the day, initially, the simplest thing is how many people do they have will then give us an idea about what is the potential for business we can do that. I'm just talking about Euro business, right? But of course, the next thing is going to be how much support do they have, because that level of support is going to tell you whether you will be able to sell your services, yes or no. As again, you understand what I mean? So essentially what I'm trying to take a look at, you're taking a look at revenue potential, either through the number of people that you have or the capabilities for a long-term relationship. So those would be some. Then you also mentioned something. So when I remember having a discussion saying that, is this a strategic fit, right? So you could do both these. Your numbers might not be as good, but what if they are working for the Dutch tax administration? So they might not be giving you a lot of business, but then you also have other things like reference value, right? That's something that you also add in. So now you're already going from 2 to now 3 different variables that you have to try and understand. And then anything else that you try, because I know that I saw around 6 or 7 criteria that you had. So can you maybe list 2 or 3 more? Yeah. We found out that I come from a publicly listed organization. It was an infrastructure party, and we worked at around 10 different European countries. Yeah. So whenever a customer told us that they had international ambitions,
Yeah.
what we did is, so apart from what we are talking about today, which was infrastructure, I will also connect you to the legal person in that specific country to see how they started up in the country, to go through the pitfalls. And that is a very cheap giveaway that makes me more valuable to the customer than just my offering.
Love it. So for me, from where I'm coming from, essentially what you're saying is the potential for geographical expansion could be one of the criteria in line.
Exactly.
That's what I mean. So I'm just translating what you said into what I'm thinking. So the criteria could be revenue potential in terms of UX, future revenue potential in terms of additional services. The reference potential of the client could be another criteria. My ability for expanding it across different geographies could be another criteria. Any other criteria that you have internally, you know what I mean, to say, we have to choose this to say, I have 15 clients and I have to now see which one of these 15 clients is my ideal client. So do you have anything else?
Yeah, we are very much a flat organization. In terms of hierarchical levels. That means that we are not that well equipped to handle highly political organizations as a strategic partner. Because then you have to match hierarchy. And we just don't have enough layers to match that dynamic.
So that's what normally I would say strategic fit. So that strategic fit need not always mean that you do everything for every client. That strategic fit has to be the fit between your structure and the way they work as well. Do you have anything in terms of specifically choosing customers who want to co-create or things like that? Because, you know, you could have a client that is relatively small, is not geographically there across many places, but guess what? They are hungry for doing new things. And so consequently, they are willing to give you access to people within their organization, and you can co-create with them, for example, right?
Oh, that is a really, really interesting question. And that's a really dumb answer because it depends. If that is what is to be co-created is in line with the knowledge expectation of my engineers, if I have engineers that are dying to work on such a project, see, I need that on my resume, or I have juniors that I can introduce into the mix, obviously I will go for it.
Very. So it could very well be that you put it in your criteria, but the importance you give to it might not be as high as the others.
Yes.
But the idea is you do it because you could always have one customer who does not necessarily fit on all the other criteria, but could be great on some, and you might want to see if that is. So you have all this criteria, and I guess the reason why I'm asking this is that every company has to do this exercise for themselves. What I like from what you said, Mark, is that you have to take a look at your own organization, your own strengths, and mirror it to the customers and see where there is a fit, where there is not, where when there is not a fit, we can actually help them do it to our benefit and their benefit. That's what I'm taking away. And when you take a look at this, most of the time, sometimes people think of ideal customer profiles and then they say things like, oh, we have an ideal customer profile for a CMO. We have an ideal customer profile for a CMO. Whereas what you're saying is at an organizational level, your ICP is not focusing on one individual, but is focusing on the customer's organization as a whole, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because then we can transfer a single buyer. A lot of times the organization works in silos. And if I can educate a CMO on the reality of a CFO, that not only helps them engage internally, which benefits my selling process, but it also helps them better understand their own organization.
But that's interesting, because essentially what we're still trying, what I'm trying to get at least is more for my audience, is ICP is not always done at the level of a CMO or a CFO or a CPO. It depends upon your company and what you want to achieve. I am looking at your ICP more as a sales component. Does not mean that once I choose a particular, this is my ideal client, that you don't necessarily have. I mean, I think you definitely will have content specifically to say, if I talk to the CMO, what should I say? If I talk to the CFO, what should I say? If I talk to the CIO. But before I do that, my first thing is this a customer that I should even be talking to? Once I do that, then I can give you the necessary tools to say, okay, should Deva be working with Luminis, yes or no? That's the ICP.
Mhm.
Once the decision is made, then once Deva is going to work with Luminis, then the question is, what is Mark's role and how do I create content specific to convince Mark? Then there could be a person within Mark's organization who has a different role. Then how can I help? Because that's the job of a salesperson, right? I have to
Mhm.
first choose which customer to go after, and then within that customer, fight the battle individual by individual as well. I love this. So when you did this, so essentially, what would be your recommendations for an organization to do a stepwise approach to do an ICP?
So first, start small.
Yeah.
If you are used to like every customer is a good customer and marketing is aimed towards a full market, fine. If you want to go into ICP, start small. And what we did on multiple occasions, build a coalition of the willing. Because good news spreads fast. And if we can help a single sales, ideally a sales that is known as the underperformer, that is the one I want to work with.
Interesting. So what do you think? You start small, try to find people within your organization who are struggling and test out this model of saying, okay, hey, let's say, for example, Deva is the weakest sale. I mean, the person who's not doing the best. Take a look and say, hey, okay, Mark is going to sit with Deva and say, okay, Deva, tell me about the clients you're talking to. And then let's sit and see. You have too many clients and these are the ones you should fire. That's the what looks like darlings. Then focus on that. But then my last couple of questions, then Mark, then the criteria that you talked about, right? So yes, Mark can sit with Deva and explain to him, but that criteria is decided by management, right? Saying this is what we should be looking for in our ICPs, correct? Who decides on that?
That is obviously management, because from a shareholder value perspective, you want to sell the services that have the biggest top line growth impact.
Absolutely.
So you have to find customers that meet that requirement.
Indeed.
And we see a lot of times that the underperforming sales is really glued to their darlings.
Yeah.
And you have to see that in a new way. So always know why the high performers chose their customers and why their customers chose them, and extrapolate how that relates to the underperforming.
I love it, because most of the time the high performer does not always take the time to explain to the low performer. And that's why management comes in and says, okay, we are going to do this. And we're going to say, this is all the criteria that we're going to have. And then the top performers are doing great. But for the bottom performers, you say, you are taking care of 15 clients. They're way too much. We want you to focus on certain key clients. And that criteria is decided by. Fantastic.
But it can be really misconstruing information, talking about top performers and low performers, because if we take a look at the entirety of commercial people and we put that in a Gaussian curve, then we know for a fact mediocrity rules the market. And that is not meant as an insult to anyone, but we know that not everyone has the top 3 sales performers in employment.
But Mark, that's the interesting point, right? Because if you don't do this ICP exercise,
yes, exactly,
people will think they're doing okay, right? People will think they're doing okay, but they're not necessarily, right? Because that, for me, is what is very interesting, because that again goes back to your fire the darlings, because on paper it looks like they're darling clients, but maybe the cost to serve them is way too much, or you spend way too much time trying to please this client because they might not have the in-house expertise or capability that they said they had. So by choosing the wrong clients, you may end up doing that. And there's also an opportunity cost of going after the wrong clients, which means that the time that you saved there, you could have gone after a real client and made more money and more value as well.
Exactly. So, and obviously, from a mindset perspective, a lot of salespeople in general, when they got hired, they were told, "Your sales, you're somewhat of an entrepreneur. It's your shop. Go run it."
Yes.
And that is not always the reality of day-to-day sales activity.
Absolutely. And this is great. Well, Mark, I know that we can talk on forever, but this is something that I really wanted to thank you, because for me, this is essential to one of the things that I've always talked about, saying that if you're customer centric, you cannot be everything to everybody. There has to be something in it for you. And then all that you said is, again, just going to prove a point that you have to decide as leaders to say, what kind of customers do we want, create those customer profiles, and then work together with your salespeople to try and install it on the ground so that it becomes a way of working within an organization as well. And that is something that I really think is important. And so I just wanted to take the time to thank you so much, Mark, for taking time to talk to me and the people who will be watching this video as well. Thank you so much, and good luck with all the new initiatives that you're planning to do in terms of sales.
Thank you, and I'll keep you updated on any
Yeah.
improvements.